Hi, everyone. Okay, that's us, we're on. Welcome. Thanks for showing up today to hear my presentation on gaining practical skills and tools for happier, more seamless collaboration. In 2016, Inspire 9 approached our startup Peer Academy with a partnership opportunity. Peer Academy had recently finished Angel Cube Accelerator program. Some of you here may have heard of that. And we were working at Inspire 9 at the time. We were furthering the development of our SaaS product and internal skill sharing marketplace, which we're still working on to this day. I9 continues to be a leader in the future of work narrative. There's just a couple of images here from our time at I9. We've moved on now, but the image below is of our dog Ponyo, who was an I9 mascot for a time. At the time when I9 approached us, they'd noticed that for many in their community, while there was a lot of technical brilliance as developers and the like, they were nevertheless experiencing challenges by this paradigm of what we might call collaboration and collaborative practices. They really do feature strongly in the narrative of the future of work. And certainly in the context of automation and globalization, we really are required to have competencies in seamless collaboration across multidisciplinary teams, platforms, and countries. And we really are just going to see an increase of this need in the years to come. In fact, when we were at Inspire 9, we used to take teams through the multiple floors of the building to show them what the future of work that's already happening actually looks like by demonstrating the ways that startups were working together to develop their products at the time. And yet, when Inspire 9 approached us, clearly they were recognizing a need for collaboration capabilities beyond stand-ups, platforms, meetups, and other sort of collaborative tools and platforms that existed at the time. And so we sort of had a theory on what it is that they were recognizing that people in the community were needing, and had a bit of a hypothesis about this, which shaped a learning journey that we took with a group of people at Inspire 9 called Leading in Networks. And through this journey, we really wanted to prove or falsify the hypothesis that we were forming around collaboration, which I'll share a little bit of in a moment. But first, I'm going to share a story. Many years ago, I was a strategic planner in a local government. I worked on very complex projects with hundreds of stakeholders. It was a really politically sensitive environment, always lots of high stakes with lots of passion. I facilitated a number of multidisciplinary meetings during that time, and I was actually completely untrained and in the deep end most of the time. But there was one night I gathered community members, police, the state government, the local mayor, executives, and consultants. We were talking about rail grade separation, and you can see some of the images up here from the project that I was working on. What happened during that meeting was a complete train wreck. It's likely that all of us have been involved in meetings like this at some time. The leaders in the room, the executive and the like, pulled rank and just played to their own interests. They shut down the community leaders who, sensing this, started to shout louder during the meeting. The chair was taking sides, and I was really devastated by how this meeting unfolded. So what I learned that night was that, the really sort of carefully planned tools that I'd put together, my agenda, my PowerPoints, all of my planning, everything that I had developed to rely on to get this, really disparate multidisciplinary group to a decision was actually completely useless. Because working with really diverse groups is super complex. There's always a lot that's at play. So, I knew I was missing something and that I was at a crossroads. and that there was something that I needed to learn to actually enable me to better get groups on track. I also suspected there was something that I needed to let go of to make this possible as well. So I reached a choice point. This meeting was decisive for me because the pain of it was really great. I'm sure all of us have been in a situation where, you're working with a group and things go wrong, and it's a really unpleasant experience. And it was certainly something that I made a decision that I didn't want to experience again. What I'd really wanted to achieve in that meeting was to enable all voices to be heard. And I'd really failed at that. It's an experience that many of us face as founders as well. Often, we start off on our journey with a really great idea, we get traction, we raise funding, and then comes building a team. And building a team requires a whole different set of skills because it's really about facilitating multiple voices and perspectives at any one time. So in my many years of learning after this meeting, I did discover a couple of things that I'd like to share now, which have been up on the slide there. Firstly, when things go wrong, particularly when we're gathering as groups of humans, what we usually do is jump to two tools to fix those problems. We create new rules and we offer incentives. Australia is one of the most regulated countries in the world and is really an exemplar of this approach of creating rules to fix problems. But my earliest training was actually in community development and social activism back in my early 20s. And 101 of our training was a model that we call, in the business, the resistance line. So I'll just give you all a moment or so to have a look at that. The resistance line is actually also known as the terrorist line, and it was developed in South America, I think in the 60s or 70s, by a number of political activists, activist movements at the time. You can see what the resistance line shows is that there are all sorts of techniques that we develop in order to resist rules and resist incentives. I'm sure every single one of us at some stage has dug deep onto the resistance line. Put your hands up if you've ever done any of those behaviours on the line there. I think most of us have at some stage. I certainly have. Now, at some stage in our career or in our families, we'll be asked to do something, and we don't actually agree with it. But we don't actually say that. Instead, what we do is we get on with the task, but we do it really slowly, or we make a few cynical jokes about it along the way. These are very, very subtle signs of resistance, and particularly my daughter, who's in Year 11 at the moment, is doing this very well in regards to homework. So the thing is, though, when resistance becomes entrenched, our typical reaction then is to get angry, to get frustrated, and full of fear. And then our response is generally to try to control the behaviour and then start to seek to motivate people through various different incentives. I'm really oversimplifying this scenario, and of course it's very different for different contexts and different organisations, particularly those that have been practising collaboration for a while, but I think you probably get the sort of scenario that I'm painting, yeah? Cool. Oh, that was my slide of resistant behaviours in a meeting. That's Obama. So why this is useful and important for us to be talking about in the context of collaboration is that our resistant behaviours come from a really deep human need of sovereignty, of agency. It's a very basic human right. And when our sense of sovereignty or agency is compromised, then we start to resist. And in this context, the resistance is actually about having our own sense of agency noticed and validated and acknowledged. And so in this context, rules and incentives aren't enough of a response because they don't actually address the issue that's at hand. And in fact, what they start to create is a downward spiral into mediocrity, where teams and groups lose their ability to improvise and feel engaged, and most importantly, to feel trust. So, when we start to talk about collaboration, and this whole sort of future of work narrative of which collaboration is an important pillar, what we're really talking about is a moral dilemma, because collaboration actually requires a distribution of power, and it's this distribution of power that really unlocks value and innovation and new ways of thinking and feeling and acting. Equally, it requires for each one of us to practice accountability, to be clear on our role, to take responsibility for speaking up, and to participate and to empathise. So then collaboration really becomes a series of polarities. Do I let go of control or not? Do I listen or not? Do I finish this task or not? Really becomes about our ability and our moral will to be inclusive or not. So when we go back to the story I shared about the meeting that I ran all those years ago, and when I'd asked myself that question of, was there something that I might need to let go of to make or to enable all voices in that meeting to be possible? The answer really was that I needed to let go of my desire to take control. And that what I really needed was to learn the types of social technologies that enable me to distribute power, to create those participative environments where everyone's voice can contribute to the outcomes. So that kind of brings us full circle back to the hypothesis that we were holding in stepping into this work with Inspire 9 a few years ago. And I guess what we really started wondering was if we were able to design and run a program that increased the sense of agency and awareness of group dynamics, then we'd get much better, more seamless, happier collaboration in teams and the like. So the program that we ran with Inspire 9 had 12 people involved, including startup founders, employees of startups, freelancers, people from a really diverse walk of life. Over 4 weeks, we learned tools that really helped to raise our awareness of unconscious behaviours and patterns that were really shaping unwanted outcomes in the way that our teams were working and that we were interacting with clients and the like. It was a really embodied practice that we ran with this group of people. So it was very much about action learning. So between sessions, we actually sent students out to practice tools that we taught, and I'm about to share some of those tools with you in a moment. So the first collaboration tool, if you like, that we shared with the group of Inspire 9 students was a tool called the 4-player model. Has anyone ever heard of this? No, I'm just struggling to see you. Nope, looks like it's pretty new for us. The 4-player model is really interesting because it's a tool that enables us to recognize patterns in behavior and conversations that then enable us to form empathy. And empathy is a really important quality that underpins collaboration. This 4-player tool actually helps us to start to see the unconscious behaviours that are happening in the way that we're working with others. So as you can see on the screen there, we've got our terrorist line. What we were hoping to do was start to unearth wisdom and potential from underneath that wisdom line through the use of this tool. So I'm just going to run you through this tool a little bit, and then we're just going to have a break for a moment, and I want you to turn to the person who you're sitting next to have a bit of a discussion about it. So the four-player model is underpinned by a notion, and this might be a bit tricky to grasp, but it's underpinned by a notion that within every sort of conversation or human interaction, there are four archetypes that underpin that conversation or interaction. They are what's on the screen there. The mover, the follower, the opposer, the bystander. Now, each of these archetypes bring a particular quality to the conversation. And our role, I suppose, as facilitators or facilitative leadership is really to enable the flow of all of these different moves or archetypes in a conversation to flow in a way that's generative. So for instance, the mover is a really important archetype or play in a conversation because they bring the authentic voice. They bring a cut-through and action and traction. And they're often sort of visualized as a statesman. Then there's the role of the follower, and this is the role of listening. The follower brings completion, and often the sort of archetypal image of the follower is that of the lover. So they're of service to a conversation or to a project and the like, and they bring completion. Then there is the play or the archetype of the opposer. The opposer has a super important role in most of the work that we do because the opposer calls for respect. And often the opposer is that person who drives you nuts because they ask so many, really technical questions. And often we can sort of throw those questions off. But really what they're calling for is respect. Yeah? And then finally, there's the role of the bystander, who is, I suppose, often known as that quality or that archetype of suspension. So the bystander really invites us to hold perspective. And often when we're holding perspective, that will shine through in terms of asking questions that unlock potential and shift the context that we're in to see things differently. So I'll just move through those as I've just described. What I'd really love us to do for a moment is just, as individuals, as I go through these slides, have a read of them, have a look at sort of the intent and the impact of each of these moves, and just reflect to yourself, what move am I most dominant in when I'm collaborating? And what move might be, or play might be absent, I suppose, in my team or in my work environment when I'm collaborating. So I'm going to run through and just have a think. So we've got the mover, the follower, the opposer, and the bystander. So if you can just take a moment now that you've had a bit of a think about that, and turn to the person next to you, say your name, and just share what play resonated with you and why. We'll take 10 seconds. Go. Oh, we're out of time. Did I talk that long? So we might need to wrap up then. There. Is there anyone who's willing to just shout out something that they shared or heard? One brave person who's going to express their sense of agency through shouting out? Pardon? Just what did you share or what did you hear about what play you might be? Yeah, so, often we're just playing it safe and seeing ourselves in different roles at different times. Was there anything else? It's very new material, I can understand that. I'm just going to wrap up now because it seems I've talked longer than I thought I had. And I guess just to get to some of the key points very quickly of, I guess what was most valued by some of the participants of the program that we ran. So we asked questions at the end around what problem people walked in with, what changed, what had shifted through learning, tools such as the 4-player model, which I've just gone through now. And certainly this was some of the feedback that we heard. Participants in our Leading in Networks program said things like, now I'm more assertive, I have more of a reflective practice, so rather than just reacting to things, I'm noticing patterns. And responding accordingly, and that before going into a really difficult conversation, I'll plan it out before launching in. I guess just by way of closing, I'll share the following model that we've developed, really to just give us a sense of the pattern of collaboration and the different aspects that are important. Yeah, the reason why we decided to show this model right here at the end was, there was something around the way that we were able to build trust in working together with the participants at Inspire 9. And what we really saw was that as you get to know other people and you start to improvise, to take risks, you start to surrender a little. And when you start to step into a place of a bit of surrender with another person, you start to let go of some of that control. And in letting go of some of that control, we start to let come new insights and behaviours. And in sharing those insights and behaviours, we're more likely to improvise and take risks more. And through this behaviour, we really do start to tap into our collective wisdom. But really, none of this is possible if trust doesn't exist. And really, trust is something that is built through growing our own sense of agency and our own awareness of what's happening around us in terms of group dynamics particularly. I've spent most of my career building what we call structures of belonging. So creating social platforms where people can really have a sense of belonging to a whole that enables them to soften into that place of surrender and for the benefits of collaboration to flow on. So I better leave it there, but thank you so much for your time today.